everybody. Welcome to the Locker Room. This is Southland's Podcast for Men. I came in hot right there. I'm excited. This is Southland's Podcast for Men, where we demons conversations, talk about the right things in the right ways. My name is Scott Apple. Thanks for checking out the podcast. This podcast is all about, our purpose is creating a culture of strong, godly men that fight for the most important things. And before we dive into our last episode for Season 12, I want to make you aware of a couple things coming up. Fight Club is kicking off in the fall at the Lexington campus on August 26th, so be looking for that. We are just wrapping up at the Georgetown campus. It's been awesome. 100 guys, incredible, bunch of tables, great guys, great stories. Just had a baptism recently. Shout out Gavin Allen and his baptism. Just really, really cool. But men, this fall we're bringing Fight Club to the Lexington campus again. It's been 2 years since we've been there. We kick off Fight Club on August 26th. We meet on Monday nights from 7 to 9 in Parkside Theater. If you attend the Lexington campus, you can jump in with us. If you're at one of our other 4 campuses, you're welcome to jump in with us too. We have guys that do that all the time. So that's a big one. This other one is Locker Room Season 13. We'll kick off August 30th. All right, so we're going to be taking a break here soon. But today marks 17 episodes in this season. We'll take a break for the summer, refill our tanks, do some prep for the fall. Guys, there are 6 years worth of content on the Locker Room podcast. And so if you're jonesing for more and you're a little mad that we don't have it in the summer, just circle back, man. It's going to be great. And there's probably some stuff that you haven't heard, but you can go back through there. There's 6 years now of stuff. You can check those out. And also, if you haven't checked out Southland's Parenting Podcast and you got kids, you should check these out. We just have done, I think, 10 episodes so far from the beginning of the year. You can find the Southland Parenting Podcast on all your platforms for podcasts. For those of you who are interested for starting locker room groups in the fall, I know that we'll kick off September 13th, August 30th, so that way you can plan, get your groups ready, and we'll have one out, the first one, hot and ready, like they do at Little Caesars.
That's right.
On August 30th. So, man, I'm super excited about this one. This is probably the thing that I'm most excited about getting to share with you today. Southland is doing a men's retreat this fall, and I am pumped. It's for all men 18 years of age or older for all 5 of our campuses. It's going to be a Friday night, all day Saturday. We'll end late morning on Sunday. Dates are October 18th through the 20th. October 18th through the 20th. It's going to be awesome. And we're going to Cedarmore Retreat Center in Baghdad, Kentucky. It's about an hour away from our Nicholasville campus. We've done men's conferences in the past, but I'm really excited about getting away for an entire weekend, eliminating all distractions, connecting with Jesus and some great men in our church. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to get after it. I've been working on the direction for this retreat for about 5 months. Our lodging is in cabins. You can do it. So go ahead and mark your calendars for October 18th to the 20th. The Cats are playing in an away game. Just so you know, we planned this intentionally. Yeah, so no excuses. And listen, if you got an anniversary, just move it and say, honey, I need this. I need some time with Jesus so I can bring back the best man that you need. But we'll open up registration in a few months. We'll let you know. Get the word out, though. Go ahead and let guys know about this in your life. It's going to be a game changer, so pray for me and our team as we prepare for it. I'm so pumped about the direction and the programming. I've got a meeting today. It's going to be a powerful, powerful weekend. All right, I got a favor, Locker Room. We've covered a lot of ground in Season 12, and I'd love to hear from you. And even if you want to circle back to even the fall to look at some of those things as well. I got 3 questions. I'd love for you to take 5 minutes and send me an email. Here are the 3 questions. Number 1, share a couple of the episodes that were really helpful for you, okay? Share the specific ones, how they helped, challenged, encouraged you. Number 2, I'd love for you to share a topic that you're interested in talking about on the podcast. Could be anything, stuff around marriage or parenting or personal growth, discipleship, worldview stuff around the triangle with Jesus and community on mission. What are you thinking about? What are you wrestling with? Something that would be really good or relevant for men to hear. I'd love to hear from you. It might be a great episode for us to dig out on a future Locker Room. So that's important. Third thing is this. Tell me how you're using Locker Room. Are you strictly using it for your own personal time? You don't have to tell me if listen, I know a lot of you cut grass or you're driving or when you do these work trips or whatever. Some of you are on planes and trains. I've heard all of it. But are you using Locker Room content with other men, whether that's a Locker Room group or accountability group, or maybe you guys just have discussions inside of whatever group you're part of? Are you sharing these episodes with people in your life? And are there any cool stories around that? I'd love to hear those things. And so 5 minutes. Listen, I've spent way more than 5 minutes, and I'm not saying this has got to be an even trade, but I'd love to hear from you. Any ideas that you have or what you've been wrestling with or thinking about. Again, the address that you can send that email, lockerroom@southland.church. Take 5 minutes, fellas, seriously. And I know you don't like email. I don't either. But I'm looking forward to reading these. So jump on it, and get those to me. That'll be helpful, even as we look at season 13. So we're looking back and reviewing season 12. And I've invited this guy, Ian Schweitzer, to jump on the podcast to help me do that. So how are you, man?
I've been doing good. We were just talking about it's sunny out there. It's nice to get out there, catch some rays.
Sprung.
Yeah, so we're in soccer season right now.
Are you?
You know,
Okay. Yeah.
Coaching.
Are you?
Crushing at the U6 level.
Are you?
You know?
Sweet. Yeah.
My son's 4, so I coach with one of my best friends. And
Is this his first year, or has he done it before?
It's the second season. He did in the fall. So we've been... that's a lot of fun. My daughter's playing a lot, so we're just out there. Cool. You know, sometimes I get into scrimmage with my daughter's team. They're
nice.
10, 11-year-olds.
Let them know what's up.
Exactly. It was funny. I scrimmaged, and the coach was like, hey, remember, we're like, you know, trying to help them improve their skills. It's like, I just want to win. You know?
Can we just crush them?
I'm doing pretty well out here against these 10, 11-year-olds, actually. So.
Yeah. I feel like Pele out here.
Yeah.
You know? No, it's funny. Has your son scored a goal yet? Does he play?
Has.
Okay, good.
He has. It's been fun. He scored 1 or 2 last year, but he's now got to get in the hang of it, you know, dribbling around. He's the smallest one out there, so it's fun. There's not much more exciting thing than when he scores, and like I'm in the field. That's what you do in like that level. So he's like excitedly coming back to high five me, and it's like this is the best. So
that's cool.
But we've been hiking,
cool.
and also we got. I mean, personal news: my wife's pregnant, and we're expecting.
How about that, buddy?
We're excited, man. We're 20 weeks, halfway there.
That's awesome.
September.
That's
so
good.
It's just been a great season. It really has.
That's good. Hey, one of my friends, he's a Fight Clubber too, Chris Ford, he was on the podcast. He sent me a text or a picture this weekend through text. His son played goalie for the first time. He said, this is not, you got to hold the picture down. You know, sometimes you hold the picture and it kind of gives you a little bit of a
live photo.
Yeah. And so he's standing there, his hands are down, he's kind of looking. And all of a sudden, when you hold this picture down, the ball hits him right in the forehead. It goes over the net, and his head rocks back like a rock'em sock'em robot.
Great save,
dude! I cried. It was so funny. I'm like, dude, he saved the ball. Didn't even use his hands. It was awesome.
He's crushing it.
It was awesome. Hey, you just finished was it a mini marathon?
Or marathon? Did a half.
How was it?
It was good. You know. I didn't wear shoes the whole time. I'm just kidding.
If you don't remember the episode, you should go back to it. But he talked about running. What'd you do, 3K or 5K?
Did a 5K barefoot.
In the cold.
In the cold.
Sand.
Below freezing.
Yeah.
It was not my...
Yeah.
I think, honestly, my body hurt a lot. But I will say, I think that one time...
You've done it before, right?
This is my first official.
Okay.
I've done the distance a couple times.
Okay, okay.
So the Derby up there, it's a great way to get in. It is very flat, a lot of people, but my feet were toughened up, you know, no blisters there.
Yeah, that's good.
The rest of my body hurt really bad.
And you set your personal time, which was good.
I aimed for under 2 hours, got 1:58. Tried to keep up with Neil Gregory, guy here at Southland. Was able to for 10 miles. Then I had to drop back a bit. He and his buddy Nathan trained a little better than I did.
Don't tell him. Don't say this because he'll just get all puffed up.
But it was good. It was a fun run.
You're a better runner. Anyway. Hey, did you take an Uber during it or anything? Did you cheat?
There's a lot of those signs.
Were there really?
I need a ride. There's people on like bird scooters and stuff too. It's like, hey, you mind if I grab that for a few miles?
All of a sudden, you go from middle of the pack to first.
That's right.
That's
pace
cool.
really picked up
That's
there.
That's right. Let me hop off of this right before we get to the finish line. Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool, man. Well, listen, we're going to jump in and talk through some stuff here. And I wanted to have you back on because you and Zach both spent a lot of time listening to all these episodes, even before they come out, and writing discussion questions, trying to facilitate good community in our locker room groups. Really grateful for both of you doing that. I also want to thank JR and Zach over here, James Rutledge, Zach Hamilton for all their hard work. They sit in for all of these, and then they got to circle back, and they get these ready for us to get out. And Zach spends a lot of time trying to look through my notes and all of that kind of stuff. He hates the font that I work in. I know that. But it's an effort of love, and we do this together. And so,
can we just clarify that Scott uses permanent marker font.
It's marker felt is what it's called. It's the font that I use, and no one else uses it, but it's me, and it's a weird thing. I probably need to talk to somebody about it. But anyway, I use it, but it's been good. But when these get to your ears, or you see this on YouTube, these guys have. The five of us have had a lot of effort in putting all this together. So grateful for all of you. It's cool to impact men this way, and I love it. So the reason I ask you to come on is because you're super invested, and I want to circle back over the last 16 weeks. This is our 17th week. We've had 3 different series. We had a couple little individual things or a bonus episode, and then we closed out with talking about pornography last week. And so I want to circle back to the first series and just we'll circle back, just get some highlights. We don't have to live there or anything. But my intentions were to this first series was Ethos of Godly Men. And so I wanted us to think about the culture and characteristics, attributes of godly men. And so we spent 6 weeks looking at 5 different topics, and I'll rattle them off and remind our audience so that way, because I know you're not going to remember them all. But week 1 was start something and stop quitting. And then week 2 was a kind of a little bonus thing that when I heard Scott preached a sermon at the very beginning of the year, How to Be Hated in 3 Simple Steps, I wanted us to dig that out. And if you haven't heard that message, you should circle back and check it out. But it was very powerful. And then week 3 was Nickel and I talked about distinctive actions of godly men. We looked at 4 things, and I'll mention that in a few. But week 4 was, my guests were all the ladies from the Tell Me More, our women's podcast, and they were a hoot. It was a lot of volume, and I appreciated so much what they had to say about their perspective of intentional godly men. They were great, and then we did week 5 and week 6. It was a 2-parter with Ian and then Daniel Mercer, who were on. We talked about 6 values of godly men, and so they were all H's. And so, which of those weeks, man, spoke to you? What did you really appreciate about this series?
Yeah, the first one that stuck out was the How to Be Hated. That's a tough one for me.
Yeah.
And I knew that going in. It's the sermon he preached and all that.
Yeah.
But
when you say tough, you mean
I'm a people pleaser.
Gotcha.
And so it's just so good for him to bring it back to that John 15:18.
Yeah.
The world hates you. It's okay because it hated me first. And so just that idea that we're not called here on earth to be liked.
Yeah.
We're here to emulate and proclaim Jesus, and
it's good.
Who, by the way, was hated by a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I think starting off the year with that mindset was great. That here's your audience, people that might hate you.
Yeah.
Here's your objective, and then this is a reward if you're faithful here on earth, despite the hard times, persecution, being hated. So I just appreciated what Nickel brought and how he challenged the men here to say, we're gonna stand here. We're not moving here from this spot. What God's calling us to.
The message hasn't changed. We're not going to change. We're going to follow our leader. He took shots. Jesus says, if the world hated me, it's going to hate you. And so let's stand. Anything else from that?
Yeah. Well, I think the other one that really stuck out was the Tell Me More. Love all of them.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Jessica, Sarah, Lydia. Especially Lydia. My new role of doing residency.
She's your favorite.
She is my favorite. Yeah. But I took over from her, so I've gotten to know her a lot through just the process of her handing off the ministry to me, and they're really big shoes to fill because she is just excels.
She's got big feet.
Yeah, she's got giant feet, and I got small ones. So, but just the idea of hearing from them, and I just love the tone throughout all of it.
Yeah.
And you could tell they're not against men. They're not angry.
Nope.
They want men just to capture the vision of God and our church. And to passionately follow Jesus. And so hearing that, and I was even encouraged to hop on the Tell Me More podcast and listen to a few of those. And it's really good. I think
they're fun, man.
Sometimes men, we can be like, I'm not going to listen to it. It's like, I know their primary audience is women, yes, but there's just a lot there for us to learn from too. And I was just grateful to get to hear that from them. Yeah.
Women listen to this because sometimes they're just trying to understand their man. We're different. We're made different. We're made in His image, but we're distinctly different. Our roles are different, and how our temperaments and our makeup. And so, it's fun. I've listened to almost all of them. The one on sexuality that they just did not that long ago was really, really good. They just do a great job. It's a great conversation. I don't know how they do it. with the three of them all the time because it's challenging, man. You want to cover a lot of ground, but they do such a good job of letting people, letting one another talk and just driving a conversation. They really have done a great job. I know it's a gift to our women, and like I said, men, it doesn't hurt. If you got some women in your life, you should really encourage them to jump on. I really enjoyed the challenge of doing a deep dive to think about the ethos, and I think about ethos in organizations and teams and sports teams and all those different things because really the ethos is what drives the success or failure of the person or marriage or family or church or even company. But I think our culture has just redefined so many terms, including men, and the enemy has been so intentional in manipulating our culture to neuter, limit, and shame, and even redefine men. And so the Bible gives us clarity on what a godly man looks like. God's given us clarity of our role. He's created us on purpose, and he wants us to step into our marriages and our families, into our churches and into the world, and to live our lives on mission. And so I enjoyed the direction of each of those weeks. 2 weeks that stuck out to me where the first week was start something and stop quitting. And I think this is like 3.5 years that I've been pretty consistent in one of these specific areas. But the point of this first one was, it wasn't, even though it was the first one of the year, it wasn't about New Year's resolutions, but it was going, what could men do to invest in themselves? And so I thought these three things are things that every man can do to invest in their own heart, life, body, all of it. And so the first one was pursue Jesus daily, get into God's Word, just find time and challenge them to look 20 minutes, look at 20 verses, and just open up God's Word. And then even talk to Him, spend some time daily, spending time with Jesus. If we'll do that, we'll ground ourselves in truth, and it will drive our days, and we will be more mindful of who He is and what He wants to do in and through our lives. And then the second one was exercise consistently. And this is kind of one of those things where I've gone in and out of seasons where I've worked really hard at this, or I've just neglected it altogether. And so this has been one of those things where I think for 3.5 years I've been consistent, not every day, but most every day, to just work out, sweat, do some stuff that is good for me. And the reality is if we should take care of the bodies that God gave us, and that matters. And it helps you manage stress. Doing something that's hard is good for us, and so that's important. Then the third area was live in community with other men. It's amazing to me, Ian, when I connect with guys, how few of them actually have friends. Men have work friends, social media friends, they have acquaintances, and most live on islands and they don't live in community. Or they live in 3-foot conversations where they're just talking about the trivial things that are going on in our world. And God tells us in His Word that we're hardwired for community. We need other men in our lives, even if it's only a few of them. The Bible gives us so much wisdom about this. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. When we're together and we're doing these things and we're running the same direction, we just get better because of our time together. And then Proverbs 13:20 says, walk with the wise and become wise. And then it says, for a companion fool suffers harm. And so who we put ourselves around will determine the direction and quality of our lives and our relationships and even our decisions. And so locker room, being in community is a gift, and God gave that to us, and having other men in your life is crucial for the direction and quality of our character and our relationships, our marriage, and our families. So these three things are game changers for men. And so that was 1 week. And then the second week that spoke to me, again, all of them were great, but the distinctive actions of godly men with Nickel, we looked at 4 areas that were really crucial for us as men, becoming the men that God created us to be. And so the first point we had in there was be consumed with the gospel and remind ourselves of our rescue story. We just have to be reminded that He's the hero, that we were lost and now we're found. We're saved, and we're saved from something, and we're saved to do something. And that's inspiring for us. That's motivating. That gets us up every day with purpose. And then the second point was to put away childhood and childish ways. And I love this little verse, 1 Corinthians 13:11. It's wrapped up in the kind of that love passage that Paul talks about. But when he says, when I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, and I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. And the reality is we've got arrested development. Men are taking longer to become men because of so much stuff that the enemy throws in their way. And Paul is challenging us to put childish ways behind us and pursue maturity, address old patterns, old ways of living, old ways of thinking, to put on Christ and pursue Him. And so we need to submit every day to His Word, and we need to submit every day to the Spirit of God to pursue discipleship and this big word sanctification, just working out our salvation. Not because we're trying to earn anything, but because God's been so good. Out of gratitude, we're going to obey him and trust him and live as much as we can in every moment with knowing that he's with us. And then the third area was seek wisdom and the gift of godly people. We all need wisdom. We are the village idiot in certain areas, and we're an expert in certain areas, and we all need people who can share stuff with us. And you get wisdom lots of different ways. You can get wisdom by mistakes, but the reality is the best way to get wisdom is to spend time with God and spend time with godly people. And so that's important. And then number 4 was move toward the mess and do hard things. God calls men to eradicate passivity and move toward the areas in our lives, in our marriages, in our families that need attention, to address the unaddressed. And so God's called us to provide and protect, which means we can't afford to let something catch fire and burn. The stakes are way too high. And so we have to pay attention. We have to move toward these things. We have to be mindful of our pace and the pulse and direction of our lives and our homes. And then Nickel shared a lot of great insight for men. It was just a really solid episode. And so the second series that we did, Southland Men, this was my favorite series by far. And I loved all of them, but this is my favorite series because we were able to showcase just these awesome stories of really cool guys in our church that love the Lord, that have been through some things, that are coming out of hard seasons, that are embracing transformation, that are moving toward mission, that are investing in other men. And so I know all of these guys, and I think so much of them. And I'll just hit these quickly. But Addison Hughes, he talked about perfectionism, idolatry, battling fear. He was so transparent. Super proud of him and the man that he's becoming. This is an episode that's really helpful for men that are challenged by those areas of life. And then week 2 is Jordan Moody. We talked about the impact of growing up in a broken home. He and I have that in common. But he talked about the good work of him addressing his wounds with the father, his father wounds, mother wounds that he got from his parents growing up. He spoke about the fallout of those wounds and how they impacted his decisions and even the stuff that he ended up doing because he was hurt and wounded. But he spoke about how it's our job to move toward God for healing, allowing him to lead us so that we can flip the script, engage and change the narrative in our families and in our marriages. And it was so good. And then battle tested with Chris Ford and Edgar Sabriet and Matt Hall. We looked at 2 areas in each of their lives. So we looked at 6 things. It was a 2-part episode. I'll mention it in a second. But week 4, Alan Chan wrapped up the series. And man, he was so transparent and so vulnerable. He talked about shame and walking through some stuff that he had walked through, and he's embraced transformation. He's got a heck of a story, and I love what God's doing in his life. So what are some highlights for you, man, as you think about that series?
I think when I hear men's stories, it can be easy to look at men in church and think they've always had it together. They had a great upbringing. Right. And I'm continually amazed when I hear men's stories of there is so much under the surface that God has brought them through. Yeah. And so 3 of these guys, the ones that were individual episodes, I know in some form. 2 guys I know a little more from afar, like Addison Hughes. Our wives worked together at Refuge Clinic. And,
cool.
I've always kind of looked up to him from afar just because I know how smart he is, how high quality of guy he is. And so just hearing how he's worked through some of those things that, have led to his success, but also, just hearing how he wrestles through those was really valuable. Same with Alan. We've got some mutual friends. We helped a guy move once together.
He's a good guy to help you move.
He is. He's a strong guy. He's a strong guy. And so, again, I've known him in this Christian community, but like it was back by, I think, when he was talking about living a double life. And would have never guessed that. But just so grateful to hear how he's repented of that, and now he's fully on fire and trying to pursue Jesus in that way. And then Jordan.
This is personal for you.
Full transparency. I love Jordan, man. He's one of my closest friends. We go to battle each week. We do a lot of things together. We've done a lot of work together and just trying to pursue Christ. And so I am always amazed by his story because I've heard it 5 or 6 times now through men's groups and just kind of hearing his testimony of he's one of those, there's no reason he should follow Jesus based on, if it's up to us.
When I think I'd left a podcast and walked down the hallway and you guys were together, and that's how all this happened, It was so cool, and I went, I got to get him on. So,
But he's just one of those where, his story was radically changed by some older men in this community that just said, we're not going to let this guy.
Fought for him.
And man, I think of what we get to do at like Southland students and be that guy for people. And because of those men stepping up, you know, Jordan has a great wife and kids, and he's an active member. He's all over the church. He's serving.
Yeah.
He's making a difference in my life. And so I'm just really grateful to see that. And, you know, he still deals with a lot of things that from the past. And so, you know, when he talks about things like anxiety and how he wrestles with that and not thinking he deserves a seat at the table.
Yeah, man.
You asked him about that, and he has said, you know, I look to the cross ultimately and just that reminder of, again, we are not worthy.
No.
But Jesus died for us, which meant he loved us enough to make us worthy.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I'm just so grateful that
it was so good, man.
Jordan got on here and got to share his story, because I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was so good. I loved all these guys, their transparency, their vulnerability, their honesty. They're intentional, man. They live on mission. They're investing in other guys. And, you know, you shared some incredible stuff about some of these episodes. And I'll just hit this one. It was a two-parter that I had with Chris Ford and Edgar Sabarit and Matt Hall. We covered a lot of ground, lots of diverse topics that I think would be really impactful for any guy that's listening, and you could find lots of things in common with them. But Chris Ford talked about battling legalism in his life. He grew up in a pastor's home, Christian home, and you know, he said that he'd never been. He said he went to church every Sunday until he was 25. He didn't miss a service. Didn't go on like his senior trip at school because he couldn't miss church. And just how that's debilitating, and him learning about the freedom that comes from the power of the gospel. And then he talked about going through a painful divorce. He had such incredible insight, and the lessons that he's learned from divorce and how God's met him there. And he gave a master class on just some things that you should do before you jump into anything else. If you're in the middle of a divorce or you're experiencing that pain, it was money. I mean, it was money. Edgar was sitting where you are, or where I am. Yeah. And when Chris started walking through that, Edgar was also divorced at one time. He's remarried. But he's like, man, I could have used that. It was just so, we all were floored by just how intentional God has been in his life to heal and prepare him for what he has now. And it was so good. And then Edgar talked about his two things were, Edgar came to Christ at Fight Club 5 years ago, and his wife did the heavy lifting. God did the rest. But he became a Christ follower. His wife had already been a Christian for a long time. And being married and now trying to figure out how to do this as a Christian man who's new, a new believer, and a wife who's very mature, how do they do that? And so that they had to. We talked through that transition, how she had to adjust, how she was even discipling him as he was beginning to take on leadership responsibilities in the home. And so there's so much humility and mutual just surrender of hearts and minds and all that kind of stuff in the midst of all of that. And then they talked about what they've done over 5 years in their marriage and with their kids, which was really, really cool. And then the second part of Edgar's story was, he's been a realtor. He does a lot of stuff with homes and stuff like that. And he sees his work as kingdom work. And he's talked people out of buying houses in this season where, you're paying crazy money. He just goes, hey, I just want you to live on a budget. What are your goals and that type of thing. He cares about the people. And sometimes he even says, hey, listen, I don't know if you're ready financially to do that. But he's got rental properties where he sees that as the people that are in there as opportunities to minister to and share the gospel with. He's got employees that work for him that fix stuff and do stuff, and he has just done so much he's brought so many different people to church and pointing people toward Jesus through his life. He just sees his work as kingdom work. And I think that's important because all of us work jobs. We all have vocations, and I think everything is ministry. Everything is, if we see it through the lens of what God wants us to do, and we can live our lives of mission. And then Matt Hall's two things. The first one was just really out of brokenness, a deep conviction from the Holy Spirit. His life had gotten sideways. He called himself self-identified as a grace abuser, and didn't do a lot of following. And then it all fell apart, and God just was right there and met him right in the midst of all of that. It was 3.5 years ago, and I'm super proud of him and just the way that he's owned his stuff. Kind of the way you see Jordan. I see these three guys because I've gotten to be in their lives. But he's gotten things right. He's gotten the right help. He's put himself in community. He's fought for his relationship with God, his marriage with Christy and his girls, and he's a totally different dude. And he is not the same dude. And I love the power of the gospel to transform people. And so that was really, really cool just to hear how much he's been growing and hungry for God. And then the second part of Matt's story was about him sharing Christ with his brother Mike, who was dying of liver failure. And this was kind of during that COVID season. And, we had a lot of conversations. I tried to prep him for it because I didn't know if I was going to go in, and then we were able to go in. But, he was on his deathbed. And to get to sit in the room and watch him sit at the foot of his brother's bed and with a broken heart for his brother to know the Lord, and for him just to share the gospel with his words, and to go, man, I don't want you to miss God's love, and I want to be in heaven with you one day. And this is what God's done for you. And man, I'll never forget it, man.
It was a powerful story. It was one of those, I remember where I was listening to it. I was driving down a country road in Versailles, and just hearing that story, man, it's so powerful. We sometimes forget the biggest things of sharing the gospel, and just hearing him do that through that circumstance was great.
He was talking about it, and then at one point he just he stopped for a second. He goes, man, we should still be playing golf, just how much he misses his brother. But the fact that this is the gospel changes everything. And that even though, I just finished the book of James. James says that we're but a mist, here today, gone tomorrow. And this is not goodbye. This is a see you later. And he's going to get to be reunited with his brother one day. And that was so encouraging for all of us, because we've all got people in our lives that have some story, and maybe they've been connected at one point and never been connected to Jesus. Maybe they've been even hostile toward the Bible or Christians or churches. And so we talked about how we go into those conversations with a lot of prayer and a lot of intentionality, and we push past the awkward, and we do the right things, and we help people understand this rescue story and how much God loves them, and because everybody deserves a chance to at least decide for themselves what they do with Jesus. And so that was really, really good, man. But this series was so good, and I'm going to do this series again and again. And so I've got to just keep looking, because there's some great stories out there, and God's doing a mighty work in all 5 of our campuses with men, and it's so fun. And I just want to showcase that. I want to tell these stories, because I think those stories are what move us toward transformation as well. It was such a gift. So we did a bonus episode with Dave Stone, and it was quick, and JR
snuck it in there.
He had to. We turned this around quickly, and everybody he was as flexible as a gymnast over there, But we had him come in, and we talked about the movie Ordinary Angels that just came out, and we talked about a number of topics. But do you remember that conversation? Anything stick out to you about him?
I do. Same thing. Remember where I was listening to it?
Do you? Yeah.
Because you called me when I was listening to it. And so I was on a ladder fixing something on my lights in the garage, and I'm hearing Dave and Scott talk, and then I hit the AirPod, and there's Scott again.
Yeah,
and he's talking to me.
It's weird when I call people. Yeah. it's a weird thing.
But no, I loved hearing the stories of Southland and Southeast, and the friendship and the partnership, because I think the tendency is, and even us as staff, we're prone to this, is to see things as a competition with other churches. And that is just the opposite of what God desires the church to be unified. And so hearing stories of Dave and working with Southland over the years, and you and the partnership make an impact so that people in Kentucky know Jesus. That's huge. And they're clearly doing huge work. Now, my best friend in ministry now works at Southeast. And so I've gotten to go up there and see the play. I've never really been there before. See it, even meeting their residency team there, and kind of my counterpart at Southeast, and knowing, hey, we're on the same team too. We're both trying to set people up well to serve the church for a really long time, and understand what it looks like to wash feet and to serve as leaders. And so I love that, and just hearing those stories of, hey, we're on the same team, even though people might think we're in some sort of weird competition. That's not the case at all.
It's good for us to be reminded at Southland that, hey, we're not the only hot dog stand in town. God's doing some stuff, and it's about the church, not just our church. And I love our church, but man, his church is a movement all over the world. And so even as you pray for our church and our leaders, you should pray for the church. And all over the place because God's trying to redeem the world, trying to bring the gospel to everybody. And so it was so fun. He's so funny. I mean, and I'd heard that story about the lady that wanted to get baptized and wanted to play her harmonica.
Yeah.
I'd heard it, before, but it was so fun to let him talk about that. If I let you play, then we're going to have to let everybody play the harmonica. But he's so funny. And even when he talked about his kids and his wife and man, it was so good. I mean, just him. They date every 3 weeks. They get out of the zip code once a quarter. They go on vacation. Just good rhythms that you go, that's a good thing to do, And so I appreciate his humility. He's so fun. He's so wise, but he's so humble. And I loved him, man. So anyway, we did the series on parenting. We hit four areas. It's not a silver bullet. We just tried to drive through some key areas, but the first one was raising littles, babies through elementary, and that was with Byerly and Kelsey Collins and Krista Tudor. And honestly, I laughed so much in that episode. They were so fun. Jason Byerly is so hilarious, and he's an architect, man. And if you don't have your kids in children's ministry, you really should, because we're doing a mighty work in and through our kids' ministry. And then navigating Class 5 Rapids, we hit some really hard areas, the teenage years with Connor Hall and Casey Whitehead and Peter Sohn, and those guys were great. A lot of good insight, and I'm so thankful that as a parent of a teenager, that we have great resources like this in our church to be able to partner alongside of us to help form Christ in our kids. And then third episode was smartphones and social media with Scott Harvey. He is top notch. I've heard that one just came out, and so I've had lots of people just thank me for talking through some of those things. And then the last episode, our parenting mission statement, to teach and train our children to love God, love people, and leave home, with John Sampson. And John's this is his second time on, and he did such a phenomenal job. He's got a great marriage, and he's got some great kids, and it was fun to get to do that with him. But anything out of that series that was insightful or encouraging for you as a parent, as a dad?
It was all great. I mean, I'm a parent of two littles,
Yeah.
one on the way.
Yeah.
And so just hearing that episode, and I'm just knowing we have a great church to partner with.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, ultimately it's going to be on us.
Yeah, that's right.
We're the main, but having a church that sets it up so well.
Yeah.
It's
good that we're not alone.
It's really good. And so we've done the Rooted Parent Dedication,
Yeah.
and have loved how that has set us up well. And we still read those Bibles at night, and the cool stories that they give us. Our kids go to Big Picture Show every week, and they love it. And I love seeing the things we get the emails that tell them what they're going to learn, so we can go ahead and start that conversation. They give us tools to set us up for the future. So we've got an incredible children's ministry team that they're going to help us point our kids to Jesus.
They're partnering with us, man. I mean, even for us to know where they're going and what they're talking about, it helps us be able to engage in the right conversations with them. So.
And then I have a daughter who is 10, so. The next one, the teen years. So I'm just grateful that we have student ministry team that is on the front lines. They're working with students. They know those things. 'Cause I was in the student team for a while, but I'm out of it, and I don't know a lot of culture changes fast now.
It moves fast. It does.
And so hearing them be the experts, they're working with these students each and every week. They know what's going on. And just being reminded, I loved hearing, who is our target? Our targets are students who don't know Jesus, the lost. And so coming in as a parent with that mindset of knowing, I'm not just sending my daughter to be to have this perfect little space to be protected. No, we're hoping kids who don't know Jesus come, and it's setting me up well and setting our daughter up well to know, hey, this is all it. We're trying to capture the hearts of these kids who don't know Jesus alongside them. And so I was just really grateful for them. And so you had kind of the experts in the field. Then you had Scott Harvey, who's a dad of teenager going through it, and an expert with his background in police work, and man, there was so much good. I know. But even just practically, when he talked about how they wrestled through Snapchat, and should their daughter get that, or should, and the battles that, and talking not about here's an age where they get these things, but here's the conversations you have.
Yes, that was so good.
And so there was just a lot of practical things that were really good for me, who's this series was for me, essentially, and people in my group of kids that are going to be approaching this in the next few years.
Yeah, no, that's good. The big word was legacy and all this. We're trying to pass on legacy, and we're doing it whether we realize it or not, whether we mean to or whether we're intentional or not. It's why we have to be mindful and prayerful and intentional. Our kids are on loan to us. We won't do this perfectly. So we got to own it along the way and strive to give our kids a picture of what it looks like to follow Jesus authentically. And we won't do it perfectly, but we have Jesus. He's our perfect example. And it was a reminder to our parents, and maybe even for the first time for some who are newer to church, that it's actually our job, that we're going to be the ones that give an account for how we parent our kids, not student ministries. And they'll give an account for what they do and how they're led, but ultimately it's my kids, it's on me and my wife Sarah, how we do this and how we partner with God. And that was super important. Scott Harvey with smartphones was great. And I hope that if anything, it just created some things to think about, because you don't have to give your kids Snapchat. You don't have to start with a Gab watch like it was what we've done. But you really do need to think about, and I love that he said it's about the need. Do they need it? And the measure of maturity for that child, and not telling them, hey, you get a phone when you're in sixth grade, or you get a phone when you're 12, or you get to be on social media when you're 16. It's figuring out, hey, are they ready to do that? And we have to regulate them in the right ways to protect them, because there's so much chum in the water that can get them down the wrong roads. And, pornography addictions are happening so much more frequently and earlier in kids. And so there's just so many things there. And we talked about all kinds of stuff. It was just, but starting small, giving them rope, even talked about, I'd learned, I think just there were several different resources that I added on there, but one of them was just talking about a contract about your phone with your kids. And that can sound weird. Some of you may go, geez, you got to have a contract. We get a lawyer. But we just kind of walk through what that might look like. And if anything, it prepares you as a parent to think through how you can prepare your kid to engage in this. Because like a hammer or a car or a gun or a crossbow, we got to teach them how to use it rightly before we put it in their hands. And they're going to make mistakes. And so how do we engage them when they do? Because they will. And he had so much insight and wisdom for us. It was so good. I love the parenting mission statement one, to teach and train our kids to love God, love people, and leave home. Too often we're just thinking about trying to raise great kids. And it's like, well, they already are kids. We want to raise great adults. And so trying to think through some of that stuff together. And it was good to walk through this with John. And again, he's got some kids that are in high school and one in college. And so we kind of have kids similar. I've got some younger and one older. But those three areas, loving God and loving people and leaving home, is super important. And so our job is to partner with God to stay on our knees and pray for our kids and just model it for them and do the best we can. And it's okay to say, hey, I haven't done this perfectly. And you can say that often. We really did do the best that we could. And so I've talked to so many guys that weren't Christians when their kids were young, and they've had to go back and even write letters or have engaging conversations to say, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't do this well. I did the very best I could, or I made a lot of mistakes, and I need your forgiveness. And that builds a bridge to close the gap and move them back toward the right places. But it's okay to admit you're not perfect. It's not okay to be passive, and it's not okay to pass on brokenness that we receive from our families growing up. It's okay to be tired and overwhelmed and frustrated at times. It's not okay to take the foot off the gas pedal and not be intentional or quit on your kids. It's just not. It's not. And so we got to partner with Jesus, and we got to go find some other godly parents that are doing what we want to do, so that we can do the best we can. Leading godly homes and fostering healthy relationships with Jesus and one another is crucial. So we got to prepare them for adulthood, and we got to launch them like arrows into the world. And they may struggle, and they may rebel, and they may even become a prodigal. Those are their choices, okay? If that's their reality, then we take a hard look at the father of the prodigal son that Jesus talks about in Luke 15, and we learn from him, and we pray big, bold, believing prayers over our adult children to come back to God. Again, our kids are on loan, and ultimately they belong to God, and he loves them more than we do. So we entrust them to him, and we listen well to the promptings of the Holy Spirit, and we keep the lines of communication open and the welcome mat out. So loving God, loving people, leaving home. Let's parent with those three things in mind and trust Jesus with the rest. Ian, we closed out the season with I thought, you know what, we're going to do something else, and we'll save it for later. But I thought You know what? We've talked about this, but we haven't just done a deep dive on it. And so we talked about pornography, and the episode was called "Quit Porn." And I took time to unpack this really relevant issue in our world, and I tried to engage in this episode, not just wanted guys to just engage for themselves, but also think about their sons and their daughters, again, because of the availability of smartphones and everything that you can Google. Pornography is more available than ever before. If you have a computer, iPad, smartphone, you've got pornography available at any moment for hours and hours. It's one Google search and one click away. We have pornography in our pockets. And so porn's not just young guys, college guys, men anymore. Young girls, teenage girls, college girls, and women are struggling with pornography. Porn's everywhere. Countless websites, OnlyFans pages. It's on every social media platform. It's on every streaming device. It is everywhere. 47% of households say that pornography is a problem in their home. And if you think about it, that's almost 1 out of every 2 houses on your street. Think about that in your neighborhood. Think about that in your city, on and on and on. Don't be confused. This is an issue. And so, I don't know. I think it's important. Anything that stuck out to you as we address this important area?
It was a great episode.
Good. Solos are different for me.
Yeah.
But I just felt like it was good to just drive it alone, you know.
And, you know, it's one of those, we're going to have to keep talking about it. I think you talked about it because we keep hearing stories of men in our church who haven't seen freedom in this area.
Yeah.
And so, no, it's funny. I was writing our questions for this, and I emailed just like, hey, I didn't have any icebreakers, any fun things. We went straight for it. And
I mean, there's no, how do you get in the water on this topic? You just got to jump in cannonball.
Share a funny story.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right.
And even like, you know, we usually try to write about 10 questions of like, we're going to use all of these, and we're gonna get into it because men need, and so if you're in a small group and you haven't talked about this and you're men, you need to.
What are you talking about?
And so get into it. Let guys have many opportunities to confess. Give them different ways to even just start with some minor confess. And so I thought it was really helpful, and just to look at. You know, it's not just a Christian thing anymore of like what being against pornography. Like there are non-Christians websites that are like clearly saying, even from a scientific or a physical, like this is a bad thing. And so in a way it's like, you're finally catching up to realize like having free reign with sexuality and whatever we want is a bad thing.
It's not good for us.
And so I was just really grateful you got that. And so it's one of those like, anytime you've got a locker room group in the future, you can just go back to, even if you got a men's group that doesn't discuss locker room and you've got a week that you don't know what to talk about, plug that one up and like go a little deeper with your guys.
Can we circle the wagons and just have this discussion again, because you never know when you're going to need it. Yeah, absolutely. Every Man's Battle, that book, I try to read it every year. Not because I'm addicted to pornography, but just because I want to keep the walls high and guarded. And I think it's so important. And this is one of those pitfalls that most men can absolutely walk into, fall into on accident, or be stuck in. And so super important. We talked about temptation in James 1, 13 through 15. But I also didn't want to just talk about temptation. I wanted them to see what James said. It's not just temptation from the enemy, but we have to be mindful of our own desires, and sometimes they're distorted desires. And even if you're new in Christ, even if you've been a Christian for a long time, we have to wage war every day against the flesh, and that's one of our enemies. And sometimes we just think the enemy is the devil and Satan, or Satan and demons and the world. But no, the enemy lives in us because we have an old life that we're trying to crucify. And if we either gratify these desires and sin, or we crucify them. We bring them under the authority of Scripture and the lordship of Christ. And so that matters. And then we talked a lot about the sin of sexual immorality and pornography addictions being similar to drug addictions. It's the law of diminishing returns. Recent hits of drugs or pornography send a rush, excitement, temporary pleasure. And here's what's true. Previous experiences with pornography in the past won't satisfy you in the present. It always takes more, and it will take more from you. And I love this quote. I don't know who. I tried to find the original person that said it, but sin will take you further than you ever wanted to go, keep us longer than we ever wanted to stay, and cost us more than we ever thought it would cost us. And you're right in saying I've so many conversations with men that are living out the pain of that quote. You know, the enemy uses the sin of sexual immorality to blanket us with shame and keep us from God's best in our lives. We have to fight. We have to fight for our own purity, for the purity of our marriages, and the purity of our kids' lives. And so we walked through a number of different things on how to quit porn. God's word calls us to live differently. Romans 12:2. The best way for us to fight the lies of the enemy is to combat that with God's truth. We talked about Ephesians 6, putting on the full armor of God. God gives us a plan to fight the enemy at every point of temptation. And I love this passage that Paul shared with us, 1 Corinthians 10:12-13. And it doesn't matter what the temptation is. It says, so if you're thinking that you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to man, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. And when you're tempted, he will always provide a way out so that you can stand up and endure it. And that's super important for us to know that, you know what, you may be a new believer and you may go, I don't know if I can withstand it. No. God's given us everything that we need, and to unpack that passage, we did a lot of that in that episode. And so we have to leverage the power of prayer and the Holy Spirit in our lives. If we want to quit porn and fight for purity, it begins with our new position, our new standing with Christ. We spent time looking at Romans chapter 6, and there's so much in there that says, hey, you're not a slave anymore. Sin is not your master. Jesus has rescued you. He's taken the sting out of that. And because of that, we can walk in freedom. We can walk new and be healed. And so that's super encouraging. And then if you want to quit pornography, we got to confess it. We got to talk to God, and we got to talk to other people about it. And that's super important. Daily, we should practice repentance and confession, not just of this sin, but other sins. If we don't want them to sit in the deep part of the pool and just get gross and disgusting, we want to get that stuff out daily. We want to try to walk fresh. We want to exercise repentance and confession. God, please forgive me. Give me the strength to not go back down that road. Help me to know what it is I need to say yes to and what I need to say no to. And so I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And then we do that with other people. It's okay for you to say, hey, man, I've struggled this week. I saw some stuff that I didn't need to, and I'm super sorry. And whether that's with your wife, and I think that's a good thing at some point, and it's with some good, godly men. We talked about Covenant Eyes, which was it's a great social media, phone device software that will help you guard your eyes. We talked about that. We talked about hating sin, and I did a 2-part series on hating sin last season because I think sometimes if we're not careful, we just hate everybody else's sin. Or, when you did something and you sinned against me, I hate that. But we don't always look in the mirror and go, no, I hate this stuff. I hate pride. I hate lying. I hate lust. I hate pornography because of what it does. And Jesus hated sin so much that he sent God did that he sent his son to die a horrendous death on a cross because he loves us. And he defeated the power of sin in our lives. And we have to learn how to hate sin, hate what is evil, and cling to what is good. And so that was super important. So anyway, anything else about that episode? I try not to redo it all, but just in thinking about some of those really applicable things and steps that guys can take to quit porn and to fight for purity.
Yeah, I think that's, in thinking of all these, a lot of this has come back to, are you doing life in community?
Yeah.
And
you can't do this alone.
I think so many guys see little value in a group or a fight club until they join it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times end of a fight club season or end of a small group, guy who just, my wife knew his wife. I asked him to join. He joined. And then 10 weeks later, he's like, I can't imagine my life without this. And so there's that reluctance to get in. But once you do, you'll realize what it's like to go through life with men who love Jesus and are in the same path as you.
You struggle with that too? Yeah. You're just like me. Yeah.
And so it's like when you do it alone, things seem so impossible.
Yeah.
But when you have a brother next to you saying, with God, this is possible and we can get through this. Yeah. And so I would encourage anyone listening to this that has not found a group of men to meet with regularly to get in a group. To find some sort of, and if you're in Nicholasville, Lexington area or somewhere close, join Fight Club in August. Yeah. Because you're going to realize how valuable being like with a brotherhood, with some people beside you, some men to go to war, and especially when it comes to things like pornography that can absolutely tear your life apart. Count the cost. I love that. And you said we have to count the cost of what we could lose here. And are we really going to give up all of this? I talked earlier about just like how much I've enjoyed just these younger kid like stages and seeing them, and you look back on photos and you're just reminiscing like immediately, like remember when they did that 2 hours ago and how cute that was? And when I think of just this great gift God has given me with my wife Hannah, my 3 kids, another one on the way, this place in this church, and to think if I were to let my guard down or just creep back into some of those sin, I could lose all of that. But I've set myself really well because I have men who every week are asking me, hey, where even the parts that you're almost getting to that line? Because let's eradicate that so you're never even close to committing one of those sins. So
it's so good, man. It's so good. Hey, the summer's coming, and I want to encourage our locker room audience to enjoy the summer, but be intentional during it. Sometimes what happens is we just kind of take our foot off the gas pedal completely. And you should rest up, and you should get some downtime, get your feet in the sand or in some water, enjoy hanging with your family and some friends. Be intentional, though. Guard your time with God daily. Stay engaged at Southland when you're in town. And don't go 3 months without connecting with other guys, just like he said, Ian. I mean, even if it's inconsistent, even if you go, hey, listen, we're going to shoot for once a month right now, that's totally fine. Stay connected. A lot can happen, and you can get out of a habit after about 3 weeks, and so making sure that you do that. And then I wanted to share this with our locker room audience. This is a book called Live No Lies by John Mark Comer. I usually don't recommend books before I'm done with them, but I am very confident that this would be a book that you would want to check out. And it's really kind of around spiritual warfare. He hits 3 areas. Part 1, the devil. Part 2, the flesh, which is what we just talked about this. And then part 3, the world. Great writer, great writing style. It's a phenomenal book. And again, you may not be a reader. You can handle this book, I promise. But it's written well, very straightforward. He's got a number of other books that he's written, and you're even reading a different one. But I think you'll really enjoy it. I think it'll encourage you in your walk with God and keep spiritual warfare front and center in your life. Live No Lies by Mark Comer. Pick it up. And then make sure you block off October 18th to the 20th for our men's retreat. I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Anything else you want to say to encourage our guys before we wrap up?
Just to hit that into discipline. Summer is time people take off church. They start eating whatever they want. Our staff, John Sampson, recently gave this challenge to us, like, hey, let's all just pick a goal to focus on some area of our life. Doesn't have to be like, necessarily physical, but don't let summer be a time to check out. Like, step into discipline and into what God's calling you to live a healthy life.
You'll be glad you did. Yeah. Hey, dude, thanks for coming on, man. And thanks so much for your intentionality in this season. Honestly, the questions have been phenomenal. They've been so good. I hope that our locker room audiences have really appreciated them, and I hope it's moved them to meaningful conversations and sharpening each other like an iron sharpening an iron, that type of thing. So really grateful. Appreciate all that you and Zach did to do that. And then, again, JR, Zach, thanks so much for all your hard work, fellas. Grateful for what you do. So let me just wrap up by saying this. It's been a privilege and honor for me to lead this locker room effort. Honored by your kind words, encouragement that I get about how it's challenging you to fight for the most important things. I get to hear incredible stories from people just walking through church every weekend. I may go to different campuses, and somebody will walk up to me and share something with me, or their wife will share something with me. I love how it's impacting your walk with Jesus, your marriage, your relationship with your kids. I love hearing stories about locker room groups that are engaged in this material, and they're growing, becoming stronger at all 5 of our campuses, even the locker room groups that are happening at different churches. It's wild. It's the coolest thing. Thanks for letting me be part of your journey and your story, and I'm honored to get to partner with Jesus to help shape the culture of godly men in our church and even lots of places outside of our church in the world. Honored to fight alongside you for the things that matter. So keep fighting, and remember that you're not alone. So hey, if this podcast has encouraged you, love to hear from you. Always appreciate those emails. And again, I gave you some quick work to do. It's 5 minutes, 3 questions. Shoot me an email at lockerroom@southland.church. And if you're wrestling with Christianity, want to take the step and give your life to Christ and be baptized, just like our new brother Gavin Allen here at the Georgetown campus. We had 20 baptisms this weekend at church, man. I mean, we're approaching 500 this year. It's ridiculous. It's cool to watch God just working in people's lives. And if that's you, man, you can reach out to us. We'd love to connect you with our care staff and get you set up. You can do a private baptism. You can do one during service, in between services, sometime during the week. One in the pond if you want to do that. You can do that too. So, but if you need that, reach out and let us know, lockerroom@southland.church. And as always, if this podcast has encouraged you, there's a really good chance it's going to encourage somebody else. So share it with a friend. Thanks for listening. That's the end of Season 12. We'll kick off Season 13 on August 30th. You can plan to launch or relaunch your locker room groups then. If you're not in a group, as Ian said, jump into a group, find some community this summer and even for the fall. Locker room groups are great groups to start, and it creates more places for men to connect and grow and fight. So have a great summer. We'll catch you next time on Locker Room.